Bo boom ba dum ba doo boo 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 boo. Boo 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 boo. Boom boo 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 boo. And welcome. Give me just 1 second. And hello. Welcome to my birthday show. I just turned 49 today. In all seriousness, thank you and welcome to my broadcast. Today is going to be Peasant Panic. In other words, I'm going to be sculpting an absolutely terrified ordinary peasant. I felt like doing something goofy today, you know. Now, basically the deal is, he's going to be a little bit overweight. He's going to be in pretty basic clothing, and he's going to be absolutely terrified. Ugh. And yes, this means he's going to be running in absolute panic. Thus, Peasant Panic. And as usual, I've got to remind you that I am sponsored by Anycubic, and their Photon is almost literally easy mode when it comes to printing miniatures. So, I see I have at least one guest. You gonna go in and say hi? And by the way, Shinju sound asleep. Her face is just off camera. Anyway, so I'm gonna give it about another 5 minutes, just get some more people in here, get some conversation going over here in the chat, and hopefully we'll have a nice fun little episode. So basically, there's ordinary peasant miniatures out there, but they're all just, going about their daily business. None of them are reacting to the completely and utterly bonkers situation that most player characters encounter. I mean, when you consider how much bigger than a normal person this lizard man is, they're still size medium, but he towers over her. He probably weighs at least 2 to 3 times as much as she does, and his arms are as big around as her waist. Go figure. And yet, the peasants in most figures are just going, I have a pitchfork. I've been mowing my lawn with my, whatever, I've been milking my cows. And just a single orc should be enough to send the average peasant into a complete and utter blind panic. Monsters attacking! So, we are going to be making a panicky peasant. Now, let me go ahead and do our usual bing. Okay. Now, one thing that we're going to do is we're going to make his hip just a little bit wider in the X scale. The reason we're doing that is it makes it easier to do an overweight character. Yes, in the real world, people who are overweight don't have wider hips. But in the real world, people don't have have shoulders 3 times wider than their hips. These are more heroic proportions. We're also going to scale it to 95%. No, let's make it 90. Oh wait, no. I'm only doing the hips. I need to do the big guy, the main character. 95%. And we're going to increase the size of the head to 110%. The reason for this is so that your typical main... Actually, it's because that also increases... I need to bring this down just a little bit more. This will make your player character miniatures more heroic in proportion to the peasant. Now, I'm gonna base his pose off of a bit of a cartoony run. And I need a little bit more twist than that. This also means that he's going to probably, let's see, not quite so much of a bend. Now, because his legs and feet are going to end up being so thick from being overweight, it won't be as bad a problem. But you remember what I said about dynamic poses and being off balance? This is going to be a prime example. And yes, for those who weren't here at the beginning of the show, I turned 49 today. Yay! Okay. That's his lower body. His upper body, we're going to side it this way, bend it just a little, and twist it. Actually, that's too much of a bend. We want him to almost be lunging forward with his hips first. Now, rather than, you know, manipulate the rest of it from his has too much side to side also. Rather than manipulating his arms from the arms, we're actually going to do that IK that I mentioned earlier, a couple of weeks ago, or last session. I'm gonna grab it here. To there. Actually, looking at from the top, I think we need to go ahead and move it over to here. And then we're going to grab this one, and we're going to move it over to here too. Actually, let's go ahead and move it Okay. Now let's actually, yeah, we need this arm down lower than the other one. Just because bend of 0. Maybe just a couple points just to for future bending, and the same thing here. Bend of 0. Maybe just a couple points. Okay. Now we're going to bend the hands up. Just a... Neck is going to go all the way back. Not all the way, but pretty far back. And then the head is going to bend forward a bit. And then the mouth is going to open. Because he's screaming. Mm-hmm. Neck needs to come a little bit forward. There we go. And then both brows. Just so that we can see them both. We're going to X-rotate them up. And then right brow. Go out a little bit. About, so 7.5 on this brow. Yeah. There we go. The basic pose. Oh. Okay. And there we have our basic peasant. So what do you think of him so far? I'm going to go ahead and make his abdomen a little bit taller. It'd be easier to make him overweight. And also make his legs and arms seem shorter. Which will then follow with making him even shorter this way. Now, yeah, that's just a little bit too tall. So we're going to... about there. Now, just to give you a clue, an example on just how different he is in size, let's go ahead and load in another base male. You can already see his legs are shorter. Just to, again, let's go ahead and put him in the stand aggressive pose. Forgot to select him, and then put him in the stand aggressive pose, parameters, X translate. You can see he comes out as taller, not just in height, but also in just stance. And his head is as big or bigger, despite being only 90% of the size. His shoulders aren't as broad, and his hips are almost as broad. So yeah, this is what we're basing our panicky peasant on. Let's go ahead and delete the base male and frame. And actually, now that I'm looking at him, I need to unside to side some of just a little bit to keep him unbalanced. Yeah, there we go. Kim, it's me. My birthday. I turned 49 today. Certainly not hers. Hers is in May. And unless I'm wrong, yeah, I'm not wrong. This one's birthday is in March. Yeah. Say hi to everyone, Carlton. No. What are you doing? What are you doing? Where's your baby boy? Why are you flopping over? Oh. Get your paw out from under there. And this is something most cats don't let you do. But if I do this long enough, he falls asleep. He's just squitching on the belly. Yeah. Good boy. Good boy. Give me the kitty kiss. Okay, Velcro Kitty, let's get you disconnected from the shirt. No, no, no. I gotta put you down now. You heard me. Yeah, the photon is easy mode for minis. Anyway, so we have our basic pose for our panicky peasant. So now we need to go ahead. We're going to add on the typical tunic bottom. And then another thing that we got to do is we got to make sure that the twists are modified. Now the reason I do this, for example, the left thigh on this leg is twisted 31.56 degrees. I will give it negative 31.56 on the tunic leg, and you see it already smoothed out part of the posing of that tunic. Now the right thigh on this guy is twisted 25.71. So I go to the right thigh, negative 25.71. And it's a lot smoother, a lot less contorted than it was. Because in the real world, when you twist your thigh, or let's say arm, and let's call it a mantle, when you twist your arm like this, sleeves follow it because you're twisting the whole thing. You can actually see it here, this one wrinkle following back and forth. But a mantle, it would stay where it is because it's no connection to the lower arm, which is physically moving. In the same way a tunic, yeah, it'll follow your forward, back, in and out, but it won't follow your twist. So I twist it a negative amount equal to however much the actual figure's leg twists. So, let's go ahead. He's not going to have a weapon in his hand, obviously. Oh, one other thing we need to do. I forget sometimes. We need to go ahead and bring the thumb in just a little bit and down just a little bit because he is panicking and reaching out. Not like this, like that. So, yeah, there we go. We're also going to go ahead and shrink the thumb just a little bit. No, that's not what does it. There we go. And that one, because it was a little bit too long for the length of the hand, and the same thing here. Okay. Now, we are ready to take this guy into ZBrush. So, we hide the tunic skirt. File. Export. Oh. And we go to Broadcast Miniatures, New. Panic Peasant Body. Accept. Hide visible. File. Export. Panic Peasant Tunic. And I just remembered, let's go ahead and load in a base. We're going to put it we're going to give him a cobblestone base. Partly because I don't use it that often, and partly because he's in town. Of course he'd be running on the cobblestone. So we go to the front view. And we're going to move it down to there. Now we're going to get a top view. And we're going to move it just ever so slightly so that foot is off the base. What did you just do? You just crushed a box. Clumsy kitty. And we're going to Y rotate it just a bit so that foot is entirely on a cobblestone, just to give it a little bit more crossover. And just a little bit up. Once again to get more contact. Now, like I said, we're going to let's go ahead and thicken the feet. Both of them, including the toes. And what we're going to do is we're going to X scale and Y scale. And definitely a bit more X scale. The reason we're doing this is because he's going to be... Now let's go ahead and just regular scale now. Now, the left foot and toe, we're not going to Y scale as much. We're doing it mostly to the back foot for the purposes of making it thicker from where it's coming off the cobblestone. And just put it on just enough to make it angled. No, let's... There we go. Now, need to go ahead and hide the skirt and the base and re-export this guy. Export Panic Peasant Body. Yes, it already exists. Accept. Hide him. Make the base visible. File. Export. Panic Peasant Base. Alrighty. Okay, Mr. Dapper Gent, that's actually a good bit of time that would take to really explain it. My default directory here, where it says Stats Studio Formats My Library, that is actually on my G drive. Basically, what you have to do is, first of all, if you use the DAS 3D download manager for content, if you're going ahead and doing other content, you got to make sure to point it at whatever My Library structure you have elsewhere on another hard drive. Then, let's see, where was it? I believe it was it device settings? No. That's for device settings are for 3D mice. So it's under preferences. Okay. Temporary files is always going to be there. DSON, don't worry about DSON. DSON is eh. Startup. Load file. This is in your My Library scenes, and it's where your default load.duf is. I don't show the login page. I don't show the home page. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. I don't really need it. The next thing is scene on new, and you point that to the same one. Notice it says G. Interface, no. Content, no. CMS is content management settings. I don't use the content management system, so. Then what you do is in here, under DAZ Studio Formats, you right-click, add a base directory, and guide it to the new My Library setup. Remove the old My Library setup by right-click, remove base directory. Do the same thing with the poser formats. There are some poser format files on there, I think. I'm not certain. All I know is that I do have a lot of poser formats because I used to do poser instead of DAZ Studio. But that's how you pretty much point it. That's a simple method. The simple version. And then as usual, people, miniature-based CO for all the miniature stuff. And yes, I do have a lot of stuff that the others don't. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and pop over to ZBrush. Import. No. Broadcast miniatures. New. Panic Peasant body. Zoom him out. Click edit. Subtool, append, Polymesh 3D, import, Panic Peasant tunic, append, Polymesh 3D, import, Panic Peasant base. And here we have the start of our peasant. Now, he's in great shape there. He looks like he could run for days. But that's not what we're going for. So what we're going to do is we're going to hide the tunic and the base. And we're going to start working on this lower poly version because it's easier here. Whoop. We're going to start turning him into, you know, much heavier version. We need to smooth that out because this is a crease. And smooth that out, even though it'll be covered. We're not going to worry too much about musculature. Not only will he not have much showing, it'll all be covered up by tunic, probably a long sleeve tunic, and breeches. Now, while I'm thinking about it, let's go ahead and use the smoothing to bring the mouth in. This is something that is an artifact of the origins of my base geo. Have I told you how I first created this base geo before? How I came about making it? Have I ever gone into that? Basically, about 2001 or so, there was a game that was one part role-playing game, one part real-time strategy for superheroes. And it was very, very, very early Silver Age, and it's looked very Jack Kirby inspired. And it was called Freedom Force. Well, it rapidly became one of the most modded games of the time. There were more mods for it than almost any other game at the time. At the time. And really and truly, it was a lot of fun. Well, I decided to create my own base mesh for the game. And coincidentally, the typical proportions for a mesh for this game, based on the proportions of the ones that came in the game, were very similar to the proportions of a typical tabletop miniature figure, with the larger head, the bigger hands and feet, and the broader shoulders. In the case of the game, it was so that it's a game. The camera is normally set way back so you can see the whole city. So, in order to be able to see the characters, they got to be big. Or not so much big, they've got to have a different proportion. They got to have similar proportions to what you'd find on a tabletop. Well, when I first started making miniatures with my 3D printer, I was using the default content that came in DAZ for strictly personal use. Now, I couldn't distribute any of them except for some of the critter figures I had already made that I still own the rights to, such as the hunting drake and the great wyvern. It's a bit too much. So, now let's go ahead and add a bit more to the legs. Anyway, when I decided that I wanted to go ahead and start making things I could redistribute and actually give to other people, well, what better option was there than using a resource I'd already done some work on? I worked on it for a little bit, doing things like adding a good bit of a bit more head detail than it actually had. For one, the ears, well, yes, they're very simple. The version that I had for the game was actually even simpler. It was just a nubbin coming off the side of the head. Just a couple polygons. And that wouldn't print well at all. And you couldn't really turn it into elf ears either. In fact, most of the figures you couldn't. The few figures that would have an elf ear, like Submariner and the like, when people made mods for characters for that, like that, they would actually sit there and have a separate prop ear on the figure, which really and truly isn't great. So, like I said, I tweaked it, I adjusted things, and one of the things that I failed to adjust fully and didn't realize it until much later was the mouth. The mouth could open, and there was a polygon plate behind it that a drawing effectively of an inner mouth would be textured onto. And so I pulled that inside the head, but didn't really close up the gap behind it. And so he ended up having that large gap that I keep forgetting to close up when I make a character with his mouth open. If I had the time, I'd eventually go ahead and make revise the geometry so that he wouldn't have that anymore. And now we're just kind of chubbying up the face a little. And then now we need to give it a little bit back here. And we frame out, and a little bit more on this side. And we have a nice chubby dude. Well, let's kind of blend that in a little bit more. Now what we're going to do with him, first we're going to do our usual divide until he's smooth, delete lower, Dynamesh to 768, and a blur of 0. Dynamesh. Then we're going to make the mouse a good bit smaller, and we're going to smooth out these seam areas that were caused by the geo not being perfect and overlapping itself when we expanded it. These seam areas, we still need those like wrinkly bits, but we don't want them to be these sharp seams because, you know, it looks quite unnatural. Now we're going to go in and cut deeper under that chin here in a second, but for right now you just want to clean up these seams. And smooth out some of the more lumpy areas. Okay, now I'm going to frame. And now I don't know if you've realized what's now the problem I've just given myself. I knew ahead of time this was going to happen, but it's why I did it this way. And that's most of the tunic is now inside him. So what I'm going to do is, now that I'm going to select the tunic, and I'm going to turn on transparency. This way I can see the tunic. Instead of inflate, we're going to be using move. The reason for this is we want to kind of keep the sharp edge that's on the bottom of the tunic, and try and focus mostly on just moving it out to where it's, you know, where it would be on our larger than life peasant. We're going to tweak the shape once we've got it mostly out. By doing it this way, we're keeping the kind of the sharp edge that's on the bottom of the tunic, but at the same time we're enabling ourselves, you know, I can turn off transparency because the majority of it's gone, to do other things with it, like grab this section down here and pull it out because it's a little bit too straight line. And then we shrink the mouse a bit and we just start making sure that it's blendable with the body by pulling this top edge in. And in this case right here, we're gonna smooth out that seam because that's where it was not supposed to be. Okay. I'm just gonna smooth. Oh, let's kind of smooth this. And here. By smoothing this area, it'll sink in, and I'm going to move it up to make sure it's blending in relatively flat. Then we subdivide it a few times till it's about, yeah, let's say 650. That'll get it close to what it needs to be. Frame out. And now we see we got to do one more thing because it's supposed to be comedy and it's supposed to be running. We grab this back. Shrink. Gonna flap this out. There we go. And pull this up a little. And now we're gonna wait a minute. Delete lower. There we go. And we're going to merge down. Always okay. Geometry. Dynamesh. Bing, 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 bing. Undo, or not undo, but turn off Dynamesh. And let's smooth out seams over where the tunic bottom is. And now we're ready to start doing things like cutting in that neck. Cutting in the chin, rather. I'm going to shrink the mouse a little and clean up those two common dots on the inner mouth. Okay. Now, we're going to use slash to do this instead of the orb crack brush because we want it to be kind of a rounded result. And as usual, I go into stroke and I turn off lazy mouse. And I turn it down to about 14. Well, 13 will do. I go ahead and I dig in there and hit 1. And I dig in here and hit 1. And then that's gonna come up. And I come under here. No, I need to make it bigger. And then go back to inflate and let's also inflate the lower lip to make it easier and more distinct to paint when it comes time. We're also going to inflate the brows to kind of exaggerate how frightened he is. And the inside of the brow is going to get smoothed a bit. Then we're going to kind of inflate a couple areas. That will be our guide for forehead wrinkles. And smooth them out on the ends. That will come much later. Frame. Okay. And we're going to subdivide it once, delete lower. We have our basic terrified TJ. It's not the same guy. This guy's actually smaller. He's shorter and he's a lot chubbier than the bard was. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to start with a basic tunic neckline, which means that we're going to start off, let's make it a little bit bigger, like this, something large enough for his head to fit through, but not so large it hangs on his shoulders way off to the side, and it kind of hangs on higher on the back than it does in the front. We're going to go ahead and make it kind of large just so that we have enough space to smooth it in, because this is going to be weird when it comes done because of the overly large and bulbous shape that we gave his neck. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to bring this down quite a bit, because one of the most common tunic necklines in history came down like that. And then we're just gonna up. We're gonna come from here and we're gonna bring it up. And we're going to there now. And let's rotate him back around upright. And we actually need to come down a bit further because we didn't cut it straight. And we're going to go ahead and make it a little bit less, a little bit shorter. There we go. That's good enough. We're going to go ahead and make the arms too. We're going to give him 11th century arms. Basically what that means is long sleeves that are rather close to the wrist. They don't hang out like a hoopland. And then let's come up here and deselect that. Okay, this is going to be the tunic bits, and we go back to our subtool, and we go to extract. It'll take a while because we got a lot of polygons selected. Accept. Deselect. Deselect. And I'll just show you, it's looking like he's got a mantle and bracers right now. Well, we don't want that. What we need to do is we need to blend it in. So we dynamesh it at 128. We don't need a super sharp edge for these guys. Except no, because that gets rid of our nice little deep edge. So we're going to try 256. That's good enough. It keeps enough of a thingy there. Alright, now we're going to start off on the neck. We're going to make the mouse big enough to where it looks like it's about there. Yeah. And we're going to come around the edge and blend it in. And down here especially because actually we're going to grab move. We're going to move it in. And kind of blend it a little bit more. The same thing applies to up here because we need to kind of and then we're just going to give it a very faint buff here and here, just to kind of get rid of some of these lines that are developing from where we did the bigger smoothings. You can kind of see these ridges that were formed. Okay, the neckline's ready, but now it's time for the arms. Once again, we make sure the mouse is covering most, but not all, and safely away from the edge we want to keep. And pull it around. A little bit more down here. Now we go to the other one and we bring it down. We're then going to shrink the mouse. We're going to go ahead and reduce its intensity and just kind of blend that out. The little ridge line. You can see the ridge line here. And that's what we're kind of erasing here. We want it to keep a nice little more organic look to it than it's got. Now you might notice that the right arm is considerably larger than the left. With a hero character, I would be a lot more concerned with that. But with this guy, well, you can make whatever conclusions you want. That it's either just simply a baggier sleeve or what. Now we go back up to Subtool and we merge down. And we hit that Dynamesh. Zoom in. Oh, yeah. I forgot to do one thing. And we're going to go ahead and just very carefully go over the neck and the arms with a very light smoothing because I forgot to increase the resolution of the neckline and the sleeves. Meaning, well, let me put it this. Let's zoom in real close on this sleeve. You can see what looks like polygons, right, on the sleeve. Well, you know what happens if we hit here? Each polygon is actually several polygons. So I gotta make sure to smooth that out a bit on both the sleeves and the neck piece before I go through and really polish out the connection. And by doing it lightly, I'm not losing my edge on the sleeves or collar. Go ahead, come on down. Come on down. Yeah, there we go. And then we're going to move. Okay, that's pretty much it. Okay, now it's time to actually start blending in. So let's turn that back up to 100% and blend in the bottom edges of all of these. We're gonna tweak the size of like the elbows and that, and this forearm that is make Popeye happy. Yeah, we can do that right now with the forearm. But as for making the elbows larger, that'll take the inflate tool. Okay, now for the neck. Now for the neck, I'm going to be hitting it a couple times with the 1 key just to make sure it's fully smoothed out. Because especially here we got a little bit of jumblies. Now we're gonna use these jumblies to our advantage when it comes time to make wrinkles. But we do need to kind of bring them in. And we also need to take the move tool to make it bigger. And bring it in a little bit. Because that was just a bit too much extreme. Yeah, there we go. We hit frame. The mouth isn't frowny enough. So we're going to shrink this a bit and bring it down like that. Because you're definitely not smiling when you're running for your life. There we go, he looks a lot more frightened. Okay. Now we have to do his belt and shoes, and then it'll be clothing wrinkle time. And hello, Todd! Yes. Now, peasants don't have the best shoes. They don't have the worst, that would be orcs. But they tend to have just kind of mid-sized boots. No, the angle's wrong. Tend to just have kind of mid-sized boots that only go up part way up the calf. So we go to there. We're going to do the same thing with this foot. frame to make sure we got them about the same height. Yep, we do. And we're going to extract these guys at 0.03. In history, here we're gonna go drop some knowledge. In history, the idea of shoes being made differently to fit different feet was relatively new, and it was something that pretty much didn't exist for medieval peasants. It would be a pair of shoes, yeah, but it wouldn't matter which one went on which foot. Now there's two reasons we did this one at 0.03. One is to make the division between the bottom of the leg and the top of the boot a little bit bigger. And two was to make the ankle down here a little bit, just a little bit thicker and a little bit stronger. Now, you'll notice I'm not coming anywhere near as close to the actual mesh as I was with the tunic bits, and that's because, once again, by blending them together, it's going to add a little bit of thickness to the bottom of the ankles. Just a little bit. And the thicker those ankles are going to be. Now, I might end up having something under his foot back here, just to make it a little bit more connection. Because right now, the only thing connecting Peter Peasant, the panicked person, to his base is that toe. Let's smooth out that a little bit. Frame out. And now he needs a belt. And I need a soda. Yes, I'm out of my cans. For those who don't know, we got a wee bit of winter weather in Memphis yesterday, which meant that until this afternoon, the streets were coated in black ice. Here's the deal with Memphis. In Memphis, we'll get like half an inch or an inch of snow. And it will melt before the day is done, but not evaporate yet. And then overnight, it will freeze into these super thin sheets of almost invisible ice that looks like simply wet pavement, but is this much above the pavement. Meaning your tires don't have that pebbly texture to grip. They've got slightly melting ice. It's one of the more, it's actually more dangerous than an actual, you know, huge sheets of snow blocking the road. It's more dangerous than regular ice forming as usual on the road. We're going to give him a belt. We had several wrecks with fatalities yesterday afternoon, including a tour bus that flipped, and at least 2 people lost their lives. I don't know if that's been updated since, but that's where it was at last night. We're also going to extract this at 0.03, because this is a nice, you know, once again, it's easier at 0.03 for a, no, I didn't want to hit that. I wanted to hit this for an FDM printer. Now, shrink the mouse, and we use smoothing to kind of straighten up some of these more bent areas. It actually pulls the mesh out in those areas. So we end up with a flatter belt than we had before. We're going to divide it a couple times until it's about, yeah, that's about there. And then we're just going to go ahead and draw on a little round buckle. And then we're going to extract that at 0.02. Except, draw. Now we're not going to be drawing on the belt buckle, but the reason we're still going to be dynameshing it. The reason being, we want it to even out the overall outline of it. And then we're going to smooth out the front and subdivide it. Now we frame out. He needs hair. Wouldn't you agree? He needs some kind of hair. Most peasants weren't bald, and it'd be lazy to leave him bald. So we're going to give him hair. But he's going to be bald. Ding! Yay! And we need to divide him. Okay, so. Question being, how far back do we draw his hairline? Back here. Yeah, that's good enough. Okay. Zoom out just a little. Make the mouse a bit bigger. And fill in all the gaps. Okay. Now, we extract, but at 0.02. Draw and draw. Now we're going to dynamesh at 128. Make the mouse a little bit bigger, and we are going to very, very gently, just kind of barely trace over the front, including okay. Now, since we still have the move tool, we're just going to grab corners and move them in a little. We're also going to kind of move the little, just kind of even out the there we go. Now let's subdivide it a few times so we have enough CO to sculpt with. Zoom out and go to slash. And we are going to make it a little bit bigger. And we're going to just kind of, well, no. Draw in where the locks are. No. And you can see we're just kind of drawing straight line bits from here. There we go. And then we're going to kind of go different from the bottom as Shinji prepares to go get her food. The reason for this little zigzag aspect to it is to kind of give it a little bit more feel like it's, you know, there is more than just one layer of hair here. Okay. And we're gonna smooth out the bottom of these back ones. And then we're going to, oh no, we're going to add, drop it down to 9. And we're going to kind of draw our this, and then we come up this way, come up this way, come up this way, come up this way, and here. Oh, and here. Frame out. That's a very, very basic, simple hair. And now, pretty much the only thing left for him is his wrinkles, and there's gonna be a whole lot of wrinkles. TJ knows about the milk sandwiches. Apparently it's bread, milks, and toilet paper. Even if you never drink milk or eat bread, you get bread, milk, and toilet paper. I don't understand it, and I've lived here all my life. The mayor. No, I was thinking he was like the town. I was thinking he was like the you know, just a little merchant in town, not necessarily a rich one, but not poor. You know, so he can afford. All right. That's something. Not thinking about it. Need to make those legs a little bit baggier. He can afford actual decent clothing, but he's not like super rich. So we're not going to worry about adding, like, you know, tears in the clothing or worn patches. Kind of bagging up the pants a bit. And in the case of the knees, not as much on the front, on this knee. But there's a good bit to the bottom and the back. Because, you know, it's that leg is moving forward pretty quickly, whereas this one is staying put. Okay, then we're going to go ahead and we're going to thicken out these elbows to make them a bit straighter, and this forearm to make it even with the one on the opposite arm. Okay, yeah, that's a good bit better. Now, we're going to shrink the mouse. I'm going to draw in some basic very basic wrinkly bits. Alright, Shinji. Yes, I see you over there. You know what you gotta do. Yeah. Do I get kitty kisses? Oh no, I get head bunts. Kitty kisses. Oh, you just want your head pets. Yeah. Okay. Good girl. Anyway, just drawing in the basic overall shapes for the wrinkles. Now notice that the wrinkles in this case will be kind of following the direction of the leg because he is running. And gonna kind of worry about the next wrinkles on that later because we're actually going to keep on doing our wrinkles for the rest of the tunic too, which in this case is a lot of wrinkles up here coming out and down and around where the leg is. Two big ones, and then there'll be the splishy. And I'm going to go ahead and smooth out some of these areas. Just remember, this is just building volume. These, when I'm doing it with the inflate or standard brushes, I am not doing this to be the be-all end-all wrinkle. And I'm going to hit smooth. 1, 2, 3. Smooth. 1, 2, 3. Again. And then I'm going to smooth the tops of these. I'm going to be very big about it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. And then I'm going to shrink it, the mouse. And there's going to be a kind of a make it a little bit bigger and just kind of and then I now shrink it again and draw on these little tension wrinkles, some of which go and blend into those, and then it just comes about bigger. We can see where the wrinkles are going to be. It's time to actually add the detailing on the wrinkles, and that involves the slash brush. Alright, we're going to start off with the subtract, and brings that up to 15 will do. Going to go from the, actually, it'd be better to go from halfway down into the boot. And a little bit of smoothing at the tops of some of these. Okay. Since we're using a mouse, we can start up delicately and then push harder as we go down in the stroke. Then we're going to go ahead and put in a couple of just kind of add in these little, yeah. See, the slash brush is, unlike the orb crack brush, is directional. It slashes it according to the direction that you start it from. And then hold on a second. And then coming in from here. Oh, got a little wivet there. Now, one thing we're going to do is, even though he's not actually bending the knee, there will be a couple wrinkles where the knee is, because as you may have noticed when you went to iron your clothing in the past, cloth has memory of where its wrinkles are. Now, we're going to start off the rest in the opposite direction. We're going to start off after we do a sharpening of the edge of the wrinkles. We're only going to sharpen the bottom of those wrinkles. Except for that one there, because that one's got kind of a simultaneous thing going. Also going to draw a little bit onto these. Okay, now we're going to draw on the bottom edge of that and of that. Now the reason we're doing these first for the sharp is because it's a matter of if you start with the in and then go to the out, you end up adding volume. And we already got more than enough volume. If you start with the out and go in, you end up subtracting volume. And he's already big enough, we don't want to add any more volume. So we're going to start with the out and then move to the in. And the same thing applies to almost any other sculpting bit. Is if you know you're going to be going both out and in on a piece, you want to make it bigger, you go in then out. If you want to make it smaller, you go out then in. And no, it's not just an optical illusion. It actually, I've done it both ways and compared, and yeah, it's a slight, it's very, very slight, but it actually does. Okay. Now we switch to subtract, go back up to about 13. And let's see, we're going to go under here. Under here. Of course, if your in is not as strong as your out, then it's still going to be larger. If your out is not as strong as your in, it's not going to gain as much. It's going to end up smaller. But that's all relative. Okay, so then we're gonna... And don't be afraid to hit that Control Z button if you don't like what happened. Like that. Control Z. Try and keep it closer to the underside of that, and down here. And I'm basically just sitting here and drawing in the divisions between the wrinkles. Or underneath, depending on the positioning. Maybe occasionally adding in another inner wrinkle. And for the most part, looks like this guy's done. Again, because he is not a heroic type, and you're supposed to have fat little fumbly fingers, I'm going to leave the hands as they are. Now, let's make that base visible. Now, I've actually had less contact with the base, so I'm not too worried about how it's going to turn out. It's also something that a lot of people will print without the base and glue it on, like later. So I'm not so worried. Alright. Let's go ahead and go to Geometry, Dynamesh him. Oh, big ol' yawn. Come on. What you doing? What you doing? What you doing? What you doing? And it dynameshed. Yay. We are currently at 1.15 million pixels, which is, or polygons, which is considerably less than I'm very often am at. But we're still going to decimate it. We're going to decimate it to roughly 70,000. And hit 35k. That's 35k points, 70,000 triangles. No, I hate it when it does that. And yeah. So now let's try it again. 35k. Like I said, up there you should see an orange bar go all the way across to 100%. If it ever goes to computing please wait, that means it hit a hiccup and it's gonna sit there forever. Almost literally. It's better, you see here, that orange bar is going all the way over to the far side of the screen, and bingo, it's done. Now it's reordering. Then it'll be writing file to disk, and then reading goes Z file, and we got ourselves a 70,000 triangle terrified peasant, which we are now going to export. Panicked peasant. And just for the sake of seeing how it looks, and there you go. So what do y'all think? Yeah. The biggest problem with CP, the CP profile, is that if you are even the slightest bit over extruding, there's nowhere for the extra plastic to go. When it squishes and it goes out to the sides, there's nowhere for it to go. 95% infill is better than CP if you have ever so slight over extrusion. Under extrusion, it's not a problem. You still need to fix that. But, you know, this is assuming you don't have a... Alright. My Anycubic symbol is currently a sensor block. Yeah, CP takes a long while, comparatively, because it is literally solid plastic. I'm just holding my finger against her neck and she's not even budging, doesn't even care. Anyway. So yeah, there are people who get better results with CP than they do with many of the other styles. There are people who don't. And since I've given up on printing miniatures with my FDM, thanks to the Anycubic Photon, I'm actually not really that eager to experiment and find out. For me, the machine is a means to an end. If I've got it printing what I need, I'm good. You know, I mean, just to grab a quick random... Hey, look! It's that half-giant barbarian. Whee! Whack. Whack. And it printed how I wanted it to print, so I'm happy. And yes, this is also Anycubic resin. Now, like I said, here we are. We has our little tubby terrified peasant. I will be putting him up on Thingiverse here in just a little bit. But I would also like to note that Tuesday I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to sculpt yet. Last night, being all icy and all that, my game was cancelled. Yay. Oh, hold on a second. Don't ask. Long story. Anyway. So, I'm probably going to just do a completely and utterly random thing on Tuesday. Meanwhile, Sunday it's looking like I'll have both Patreon broadcasts again. So, I'm going to go ahead and say goodnight, y'all, as after all, it is my birthday. And I'm going to do the usual with the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 hand. So, I'm going to go ahead and thank y'all. If y'all are watching on YouTube after the fact, don't forget the whole like and subscribe stuff down there. And I'd like to thank y'all for coming and hanging out. So that's going to be a 5, 4, 3. Thank you for the happy birthday, too. And a 1. Good night.
Good night, everybody.